One kid killing the parents is a bad seed. Two kids killing the parents is a bad family.
Did you tell your dad who'd made the situation worse?
No. I told him the room was great, you know, and I was settled and there was no more problems and he didn't have to call anymore.
Why didn't you tell him you made things worse?
He just didn't tell my dad he was doing the wrong thing. My dad was a brutal guy. He did what he wanted. He was a very, even little problems like this, he had very severe solutions, and they almost always worked. And if once a problem got to his attention, he handled it in his way. And there wasn't any, you should have done it this way, or I didn't appreciate that, or he'd just tell you to, I never even said that, so I don't know what he would say, but that would have been weak, and I wouldn't have done that.
It would have been weak if you said, you're hurting other people's feelings, you're making other people not like me. That would have been something you couldn't admit to?
Yes, because I was not supposed to be concerned with what other people thought about me. I was supposed to focus on my goals. And he didn't really think that the kids at that school mattered anyway. It was really just the kids' fathers, because my dad was going to take me far beyond whatever these kids could achieve. But he felt that a great number of the kids were there because their dads were powerful, wealthy, connected, and that's where the help was going to come from, the contacts. So, get along with the kids insofar as you can, the fathers will help you out then. And that's why I was at that school.
For the contacts?
Yeah.
You met Donovan Goudreau in February of '89, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you two become very close friends?
He was my closest friend ever.
How much time did you spend with him? Did you see him every day?
I saw him, we basically spent all day together and all night, since he stayed in my dorm room. And
had he had an apartment when you first met him?
Yes.
And did something happen with his living situation?
Yes.
And did you then let him stay in what you said was a two-man room?
He stayed there, or when I stayed at Aunt Terry's, which was more often than not, he stayed with me there.
And you said you spent all day with him. Was he a
Yes.
student at Princeton?
No.
Did he claim to be a student at Princeton?
He said that he was supposed to go in the fall and that he had taken time off. He said that he had transferred from junior college, and it was a complicated story, but he had transferred from junior college and they wanted him to wait till the fall. No, he wanted to wait till the fall so he could get to know the area, and since he had driven across the country in his truck. And so he was working in restaurants there, and he wanted to sort of stay on campus a lot and meet the kids, and that way he could start in the fall. And he was older than the rest of the kids as I was, so we had that bond, and we became very close.
Did you want him to be a close part of your life?
Yes, I thought this could be a friend I could have for my life.
And if you were going to have someone who was going to be a friend for your life, would he have to meet someone's approval?
Yes.
Whose approval would he have to meet?
He'd have to meet Dad's approval.
And from the time you first met him, did you begin working with him to help him be a person who could meet your dad's approval?
Yes, I tried to. My dad had always said that I couldn't really have close friends. It wouldn't work out for lots of reasons, one of them being that they weren't trained in the same way that I was. They weren't brought up in the same way. And so I knew a lot of the things that my dad respected. And so I basically, I really wanted him you know, I wanted him to be a part of my life, and in order for that to happen, he had to be accepted in the world I had with my dad. And so I went ahead and, you know, I helped him memorize all the phrases my dad had me memorize.
Now, when you say all the phrases, are these phrases out of a particular book?
Yes, the ones I repeated the other day, and a lot more. That.
What book are we talking about?
The Greatest Salesman in the World.
By?
Ogmandino.
And so this was the book that your dad had used with you?
Yes.
To train you?
Yes.
Or one of the books?
Yes.
And so did you begin training Donovan?
Yes.
How did you train him?
We just went over and over and over the passages. I give him an understanding of why my dad had me read them, what they meant to him. He spent his time when I was in class, if he didn't go to class with me, memorizing them. And you know, he was very willing and excited about it. And we had lots of long talks about my dad and what he would admire and what he would not. I helped him, I gave him a good idea of the way my dad spoke and not to be rambling on in his presence, and how to get an indication of when the atmosphere changed in the room and he would want him to be silent, because my dad was very fiercely critical of people, and especially my friends. I had never had a friend that even came close to his approval. But Donovan was very bright and very excited about this, so I thought it could work.
What did you mean when you said to be able to sense the change in the atmosphere in the room?
He, you know, from the way that my dad looked at me, I could tell if he wanted me to stop talking, if he wanted me to express myself better. He was kind of disgusted, or if he was pleased what I was saying to other people. You know, by the way his hands move, if he wanted you to stop, or you know, obviously there were all the signals for tennis, but even outside of tennis there were all kinds of cues. Nodding of his head, just the way he said my name, for me to act in certain ways. And I wanted Donovan to sort of get used to that, because if in fact I was going to be working with my dad through my life, and I wanted him to be a part of that, he would have to get used to my dad's behavior, which was very difficult. And that's why in my dad's business he had brought people from New York who had gotten used to his behavior. And so I worked with him in this way, and he seemed to understand what I was talking about.
At some point, did you bring him to California to meet your dad?
Yes.
And did you have particularly intensive training sessions with him before the dinner with your dad?
Yes. We prepared for the dinner talks, which were going to be the most grueling part. And I didn't think, I knew he had never had dinner conversations like this before, and I just wanted to prepare him as best I could.
How did you prepare him? What did you do?
We just played I played my dad, basically, and tried to grill Donovan in the way I thought my dad would, with lots of sharp questions and going back constantly to the things he had said. And we spent like an hour or so doing this, and Donovan answering the questions, and I would explain to him how to do it the way I did, with very short answers, very polite, and not open yourself up to, being attacked by him.
All right, let's take our recess, and ladies and gentlemen, we'll resume.
Did you subsequently have dinner with your father, with Donovan?
Yes.
And what happened?
We had dinner, and he grilled him in the way that I had told Donovan he would. And
what kinds of things was he asking him?
he was asking him mostly personal questions in the beginning, like where he was from, why he was going to Princeton, why he wasn't going that semester, what were his reasons for waiting, did he have any family, what did his dad do, just lots of different personal questions, and then wanted to know what he thought about life. What was his basic philosophy of life? What do you want to do with his life? He was going to go to this particular school. What was that going to do for him? And he would be jumping back and forth between subjects, like I had expected. And Donovan didn't do too well.
How did you feel while this was going on?
I was very nervous, and Donovan was just pale from being nervous. And
why were you nervous?
Because I thought that he wasn't going to do well, and my dad was going to tell me that I should get rid of this guy as a friend, because he was wishy-washy. And Donovan was a very soft guy, and I knew my dad would sense that right away, and that would be a strike against him. And so Donovan really needed to be forceful in these conversations, and he really wasn't doing that as well as I'd hoped. And basically my dad said to me afterwards that this guy seems real weak. And
how did you feel when he said that?
I felt like he was going to tell me to stop hanging out with him.
You were 21, is that right?
Right.
Why couldn't you tell him, I like him, I can pick my own friends?
For the same reasons I said before, just didn't say that to my dad. And he really didn't say that to my mom either, but for different reasons. My mother would just get enraged and completely go off. My dad would be very short with you and just dismiss you. And I needed my dad, and my relationship with him was strained, and a lot of painful things, but also he was there to help me in my life, and he kept me up. He kept me going at times when I was very depressed or down or distracted. And nothing seemed really worth it to press the issue on to the point of, my dad could just summarily dismiss me from his life at some point. And I didn't want that to happen.
Why not?
I loved my dad. And I wanted to be a part of his life.
Even though he was going to be making all the decisions for you?
I figured there would come a time when I would make a lot more decisions.
Was he going to pick where you lived?
Assuming we went to Florida and we did what he wanted to do, yeah.
Was he going to pick what career you had in the future?
It was going to be political. It might be business-oriented also.
But he was going to pick it?
Right.
Was he going to pick who you married?
He might. He would.
Was it okay with you that he make those decisions for you?
That's just the way it was. I mean, it's hard to explain, but in my, there was my mom and my dad, and my mom had so much control, especially in the later years, through just her own ability to inflict, just attack people, or, she had her threats, she had her whole, that's how she controlled the things around her, was basically scaring people because of her behavior. And my dad just, it was like, he controlled everything around him in his whole life. And very rarely did I see him disturbed or anything. He just seemed like he was always in control, and he was incredibly successful. And I wanted to be a part of his life. And from early on, he was always there. And I just, neither me nor any of my friends could imagine a time when I would just be, my dad wouldn't be there.
Did you think you could make it on your own?
I really didn't.
Why not?
Just from working with my dad at the business and failing so miserably, and really in tennis not ever reaching the levels that we had set for me. In school, I felt completely inadequate. I was not anywhere near as smart as the kids at Princeton, and I could not do their work. I just really felt like I was way, way below what my dad could do. He did things sort of by magic, and I struggled at the slightest thing. And he saw that, and we would talk about that and the different flaws and weaknesses and work on them. But I never really got to a point where I felt comfortable saying, "Hey, Dad, let me do this."
Did you spend a lot of time talking with your dad about your flaws and weaknesses?
We talked about them, yeah, very regularly.
How much time did you spend talking about your strengths?
We didn't really talk about strengths, except in tennis. I had some strengths, and we would try to pattern my game around that. But in life, I was pretty much weak and oversensitive, in his opinion, over, just the whole thing with my girlfriends. And, like with Christy, I was going to keep the baby and marry her. And these things were just stunning to him, that I could be so stupid as to throw my life away on things like that could be corrected. So, I continually had these problems, and we talked about them regularly. And I sort of agreed that I was going to have a hard time in the future, because I was never going to be able to control the business meetings anywhere near the way he did. I don't think I could inspire people the way he could, and control them and get them to focus on what he wanted. He was something brilliant.
And were you something brilliant?
No, I wanted to think that, and there were times when he told me that I was.
So there were times he told you were brilliant?
Mm-hmm.
Very often?
No, I really remember one time at my Aunt Terry's, when we had a big, long conversation about these issues, and about the fact that I could never be what he wanted, and I could never be as good as he could. Even if somehow I managed to get all these qualities and do what he did, I still wouldn't have started from the same place. I would have started at a school like Princeton, not an immigrant with nothing. And so I talked to him about coping with that.
And this talk at your Aunt Terry's, when was this?
This was in spring of '89, around Easter.
And were some decisions made about your future at that time, in terms of what the expectations were?
Yeah, we made a lot of decisions in that conversation in the basement.
How long did that last, that conversation?
A few hours, like 3 hours.
This is spring of '89, so you're 21?
Right.
And you said some decisions were made?
Yes.
Is this about your future?
Yes.
And who made these decisions?
My dad made them after discussions with me as to what he felt I could handle. I wanted to transfer out of the school.
Out of Princeton?
Yes.
Into what school?
University of Pennsylvania.
Why did you want to transfer?
Or even UCLA, some school that had business courses. I felt I was really floundering at Princeton to some degree, at least with the grade level that my dad wanted me to get. I couldn't get that. And also I felt, like I had said, that I really was inadequate to do what my dad was doing, and it was making me nervous that I was sort of getting older and a time would come when he would really press me to take on responsibilities, and I didn't know how I was going to learn these things. And I figured, Princeton has no business courses whatsoever. It's not a trade school in that way, and this University of Pennsylvania or UCLA had the courses, small business courses, corporate courses, things that I could get a grasp of, learn something. So I talked to my dad about that it might be a good idea for me to switch, just feeling very insecure about myself, and basically came to an arrangement. I had always thought I was going to graduate school, and he had decided that I wasn't going to go to graduate school anymore, so I didn't need to get the same grades. That all I had to do was pass and get the degree and meet people and get the contacts, and that was all he wanted out of me for the school. And I could concentrate on my tennis there if I wanted, and so we basically made that deal, and then he in turn would guide me, take care of the business end, and he obviously had money, and he said he was going to have a great deal more money in the future, and he'd be able to finance any business I wanted after I graduated if we wanted to start me out in business before I go into politics. And he hadn't quite worked it out, but basically told me not to worry about it at school, just pass.
Well, did you feel when you got out of school you were going to be capable of doing these things on your own, or
I didn't, but
were you going to be dependent on him?
I would be dependent on him to a great extent. He kept telling me that business was easy and that it was simple and you just had to go about it a certain way, and that he would teach me later on that I shouldn't be concerned with it now. And so I accepted that.
Okay. Let's go back. We were talking about your relationship with Donovan. After you had the visit with your parents and the talk with your dad, did you and Donovan return to New Jersey?
Yes.
And did you continue to be close with him?
Yes.
And did you continue the same types of talks that you were talking about earlier in terms of philosophy and memorizing things?
Yes.
And at some point in time, did you have a dinner with him that you heard Donovan describe here, a dinner in a Chinese restaurant?
Yes.
And was there some conversation at that dinner about being close and having no secrets?
Yes.
And did Donovan tell you something in that conversation?
Yes.
What did Donovan tell you?
Objection, hearsay.
Being offered for the truth of what was said.
No, it's nothing to do with the truth of the matter.
Objection, irrelevant.
What did Mr. Goudreau tell you?
He told me it was I could tell that something was coming, and he, after some amount of him crying and having a hard time getting out, he told me that he had been molested by his uncle, or I believe it was his uncle, another adult, and he told me a little about that and was crying, and of course this...
How did you feel?
I felt very bad for him.
Why?
Because I knew how it felt.
And did you say something to him?
I told him...
Did you want to help him?
I couldn't help him. I just wanted to comfort him and let him know that he felt that made him lesser and weak, and I wanted to let him know that the same thing had happened. I told him, I don't remember exactly what I told him, but I let him know that the same thing happened to myself and my brother, and that it was okay.
How did you react when you saw him crying and upset?
I started to, I don't know if I started crying or almost, but I felt like I couldn't talk. And I had to go to the bathroom. Came back, and I think he felt better.
Why did you feel the need to comfort him?
Because he was in tremendous pain. I got the impression he hadn't told anybody this before in his life. I was amazed that he had told me.
What was the importance of telling him that it had happened to you? Why did you think that was going to help him?
Because I didn't want him to think that it made him. He was saying it in a way like he couldn't be like me or something like that, and I wanted him to know that it was okay, and that didn't have any, and the same thing had happened to me, and that and to my brother, and that didn't make him anything strange.
Did you feel that about yourself, that what had happened to you didn't make you anything strange?
Well, I really hadn't thought about it in a long time. And it was somewhat of a good, I felt in some comfort myself that something had happened to him, although not really the same thing, but
Why? Why was that comforting that it had happened to him?
I don't know.
Why hadn't you told people, had you told people before this that you remember except your mother? Why hadn't you told anybody before?
Partly fear of my dad, for sure, would be one reason I never would. But also, I was already feeling like an overly, I had stuffed animals, I had these problems with the girlfriends, and I felt so much lesser than my dad, and lots of shameful feelings, embarrassment with, even back when the bedwetting was happening. I constantly, it was just one thing after another, and I wanted to put this out of my mind, and my dad never brought it up. So I didn't ever tell anybody.
Was it a painful memory? Or a memory that didn't matter?
It was obviously very painful, but I really didn't allow myself to think about it until, this my best friend mentioned, talked about this, and he was crying, and I could barely talk, but I felt I couldn't not tell him. I just told him.
Did you do it for him or to make you feel better?
I think I did it for him.
Did it make you feel better to tell him?
I think we both felt a lot better, for sure.
Did that make you even closer?
Oh, yes, we made much closer after that.
Now, you'd met him in February of '89, is that correct?
I think it's February.
February or March?
Yeah.
In May of '89, was that after you'd had this conversation with Donovan that you received a phone call from your dad?
Yes.
And